Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza, Bernard Ntaganda, Déogratias Mushayidi.
We believe these are living examples of an outstanding contribution to the fight against intolerance, fanaticism and oppression in the cause of defending human rights and freedom of thought. The volatile situation in Rwanda was not confined to 1994. It had been occurring prior and continues post-genocide, and we think this must be recognised. The international community, along with recognising past atrocities, must not jettison recognition of these nationals who are fighting to maintain peace and democracy domestically in Rwanda now in 2012. Unequivocal respect for human rights is essential for the maintenance of democracy, creating strong institutions and ensuring peace. It has been reported by Human Rights Watch this year, among others, that freedom of expression and political space are still severely restricted in Rwanda. Amnesty further reports that there is a growing trend in Rwanda to convict individuals of threatening national security for criticising government policies. Our candidates are representatives of many other repressed members of opposition parties, journalists and other perceived critics of the government who've been arrested, detained and tried, some solely for expressing their views. Rwanda needs more than monetary aid, as recognised by the recent suspension of such. We must make clear that our role extends outside of monetary support and is more importantly based on a desire to ensure sustainable peace, security and respect for human dignity. We should take this opportunity to recognise the work of these individuals working towards the aim of democracy and should not again ignore. We should openly and publicly support Rwandan citizens exercising their freedom of speech in the hope of building a sustainable democracy. The three girls will represent each candidate.
Déogratias Mushayidi. Mushayidi, once a former member of the RPF, became the most critical journalist of the Kagame-led regime. He founded and led the Pacte de Défense du Peuple before he was arrested whilst in exile in Burundi in March 2010. He was handed over to Rwandan authorities during the presidential electoral campaign in Rwanda. In September 2010, Mushayidi was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment for spreading rumours, initiating civil disobedience, and recruiting an armed group to overthrow the government. His actual actions for which he was arrested were, in fact, writing critical articles disseminated in the public press, acting against corruption, and involvement in political organisations against the opposition, spreading rumours, initiating civil disobedience. A vibrant and free press is essential to all healthy democracies. It allows critical advancements in thought and behaviour. A main function of this organ is to push the boundaries and test the margins of acceptable thought. It is also vital to monitor the activities of the government. Mushayidi was a powerful proponent in this mechanism, of this important mechanism in Rwanda, as the foremost critic of Kagame. Gerard Karangwa, the vice president of the PDP, proclaims Mushayidi's innocence. He argues the prosecution failed to provide witnesses, and the defence did not spread rumours about Kagame's regime. Rather, he simply stated the truth, recruiting an armed group to overthrow the government. Corruption is insidious to a functioning democracy, clouding any attempt at direct accountability. Mushayidi spoke out against corruption in the Kagame regime, which ultimately led to his victimisation and arrest. The regime indicts potential political opponents on flimsy charges with a view of strengthening the RPF's authoritarian system, inciting violence against the Kagame-led regime. The rule of law must independently keep in check the activities of those in power. However, in this case, the rule of law was used to criminalise democratic acts, thus becoming an additional arm for the government to utilise to further its own ends. Mushayidi was a victim of this misuse of the law. Mushayidi's case highlights the critical importance of the right of opposition parties to the freedom of expression, freedom of association and peaceful assembly, as argued by Amnesty International. A victim of the 1994 genocide, to which he lost his entire family, Mushayidi has dedicated his life advocating for the reconciliation among Rwandans through the establishment of fair justice and the search for the truth about the Rwandan tragedy of 1994. Many among them, including Joseph Matata, coordinator of the Centre Against Impunity and Injustice in Rwanda, has compared Mushayidi to Mandela as a man of hope to help conquer the ethnic tensions which still exist in Rwanda and to create a viable country for all citizens in Rwanda.
Bernard Ntaganda. Bernard Ntaganda is the founder of the Ideal Social Party Imburukari and a former presidential candidate. The Imburukari were the only new party which successfully secured registration for the Rwandan elections. However, Ntaganda was imprisoned the day candidates for the presidency of Rwanda were to be registered and subsequently sentenced by the Rwandan Supreme Court to 4 years imprisonment. The crimes of which he was convicted are breaching state security, divisionism, and attempting to plan an unauthorised demonstration. His actions in fact were holding public speeches addressing government policies, being a leading member of the opposition, and participating in peaceful political gatherings for which he believed he had gained authorisation. Amnesty International have described this prosecution as based solely on his speeches criticising government policies. According to Human Rights Watch, Ntaganda's arrest and prosecution have been politically motivated from the outset. Breaching state security. Democracy requires the involvement of all sections of society. In organising large-scale speeches and debates, Ntaganda was attempting to engage large amounts of the population. The success of his attempt to include the masses is clearly a danger for the current government, not a danger to the security of the state of Rwanda itself, and was swept under the banner of the infamous catch-all state security. Divisionism. Ntaganda was a strong opposition politician. Democracy requires such a vibrant opposition. Kagame, however, has determined this a crime and called it divisionism. In 2002, divisionism was made a crime, but the law prohibiting it offered only a broad and vague definition of the term. When asked to define divisionism, not one judge interviewed by Human Rights Watch was able to do so, despite each having adjudicated and convicted defendants on such a charge. Silencing opposition views silences productive and constructive debates as to how to advance, which in turn suffocates progression. Attempting to plan an unauthorised demonstration. Freedom of expression is exemplified in the right to publicly protest against perceived wrongs in society. The right to protest should be facilitated by any democratic regime. Ntaganda was held criminally liable for seeking to publicly address issues through peaceful public protest on behalf of Rwandan citizens, for which he believed he had gained sufficient authorisation. The Imburukari has been greatly weakened since Ntaganda's arrest. In March 2010, members of the ruling RPF, together with dissident members of the party, engineered a takeover of the Imburukari, replacing Ntaganda with a new and compliant leadership, one which has not been known to date to criticise the current government. Ntaganda encapsulates what is needed to build a progressive and functioning democracy, and has fought consistently through democratic channels in an attempt to make the democratic process in Rwanda a viable one, to the detriment of his own personal freedom.
Who is Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza? She's a Rwandan political woman who returned to her country after 16 years exile in Netherlands. After she was elected president of the Unified Democratic Forces, she fought hard for what she believed in, namely human rights, accountability, rule of law, social justice, and reconciliation in Rwanda. She has been a core defender of the freedom of thought, despite the oppression suffered by political opponents to Kagame's regime. Among others, Human Rights Watch denounced the threat, aggression, and harassment she had to deal with. In 2010, she decided to run the presidential election and build a brave political program based on the improvements of human rights, justice, education, health system, external relations, economics, policy, security forces, and so on. But another key aspect of her fight has been the promotion of dialogue between Rwanda's threatening groups, Hutus, Tutsis, and Twas, as she is convinced that it's the only way to achieve peace and freedom for all Rwandan citizens and without any differentiation. Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza often denounced the internal and external policy of the regime and defends the duty to remember the Rwandan genocide, condemning any political hijacking as well as any attempts to divide the population. Furthermore, Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza strongly believed in the sovereignty of the people and tried to access power through a peaceful and democratic process for, she said, making a turning point in the development of Rwanda where the use of violence to access power has marked. Unfortunately, a wish of political pluralism and democracy, as well as her candidature, has been stopped short. Indeed, she was unable to take part in the election as she has been arrested by Paul Kagame regime in 2010. Since then, she has been accused of crime of divisionism, ideology of genocide, collaboration with armed groups. She was imprisoned where she has been victim of inhuman treatment and torture, and she is now facing an unfair trial with no guarantee of the respect of her rights. But in fact, Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza has been imprisoned because she has become a living symbol of the fight for freedom, justice, and democracy in her country. She's also a proof of the repression suffered by all those who were brave enough to dare to challenge Paul Kagame. Thus, we strongly believe that she should receive the Sakharov Prize. Thank you for your attention.